Honestly, we're living through a time unlike any other. And for the first time, AI is legitimately capable of solving some really impactful problems for knowledge workers.
Welcome back to episode number 10 of the Unsafe Harbor podcast. I have a very special episode for you all today, and I am so excited. In this episode, we'll be talking to Neelan Veloo and Adi Viswanathan, the co-founders of Mando, the AI co-pilot for Workday Admins. Mando is an official Workday partner that is using AI trained on Workday Community and knowledge contributed by a team of Workday experts. We'll get to talk a lot about Mando, how it works, and how we're all kind of preparing for the incoming AI innovation. But before we get into that, I did want to make sure that I shared some information with you all. The company that I work for is currently a very, very happy Mando customer. As an independent podcast, I decided early on not to take any sort of sponsorship. In fact, I'm personally paying out of my own pocket for things like video editing, recording, hosting softwares, and subscriptions. The reason that I'm even sharing all of this is to really say that the guests that I'm inviting to the podcast are all people and partners that I truly, truly believe in and want to highlight. All right, I'm done talking. I am so excited for this episode. Here is my conversation with Neelan and Adi from Mando. Talking about your entry into kind of the Workday ecosystem, you both have entered it from a very unique place and perspective. So I would love to hear about how you heard about Workday and how we even got to this point of like having this conversation.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it speaks to Workday in general. A lot of folks I chat with have had the most unique backgrounds into the Workday ecosystem. So Adi and I, we both have technical backgrounds, engineering backgrounds. Adi studied computer science and AI at Stanford. I studied computer engineering at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And prior to meeting, we both were working at a venture capital firm together. And prior to being at that VC firm, we were front and center on some large software implementations for enterprises like Walmart, Home Depot, Chevron, AB InBev. At the VC firm that we met at, for folks who are listening that aren't super familiar with venture capital, VC firms invest in super high growth tech startups, companies that aspire to become, Workday sized at some point. We kept seeing two patterns, right? So you had the small early stage businesses that were scared to adopt Workday, right? Even though they needed it, because the TCO, the cost, the complexity was completely out of reach. And then we had later stage companies who had already implemented Workday, they're live on Workday, they're spending millions on support, and they're heavily dependent on outside firms, and they didn't feel like they had the right knowledge or expertise internally to actually maintain the application. So the takeaway from us was like, hey, the Workday platform itself, it's growing. The knowledge about how to configure it is growing as well. It's all housed on Community, and that increases every single year. Being able to navigate that knowledge is super difficult, right? So, that was kind of our entry into saying, hey, there's definitely this problem within the Workday ecosystem. And Workday itself is used by over 60% of the Fortune 500, and that's for a certain reason, and they're expanding heavily down market. So as Workday is growing more, it's becoming more feature rich, it becomes harder for teams to be self-sufficient. So that's ultimately what pulled us in. We saw an opportunity to empower customers to solve their own problems and equip themselves with knowledge in the process.
Yeah, I love that. So that is a really, really clean picture of the problem, right? Like you saw that. And I think being in the Workday space, there's just way too much knowledge to go through, especially in a site like Community, right? Talk to me about the inflection point of seeing this problem and then seeing the technology develop at the same time.
Totally.
Talk to me about the crossroads there, and what was the aha moment for you guys to say, you know what, we might be able to come up with a solution here.
100%. Yeah, Adi, you want to take this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we were looking at this space roughly when the large language models were starting to take over the mainstream, right? And this is around the time when GPT-3 was released. And there was a clear opportunity that we saw to build a really high fidelity question answering system, one that resembles what a supercharged Workday professional, someone that has a lot of experience, would be able to provide to a newcomer to the Workday ecosystem. And as you pointed out, Christian, there's a lot of knowledge out there, right? And what AI does really well is find the needle in the haystack instantly and compose a very human readable solution or answer, right? And so what we realized is that the technology was finally at the point where it was able to provide real value in an enterprise context. And so that kind of got us to starting to iterate and build and to where we are today, which is, with Mando, we've built really the first AI co-pilot for Workday admins, right? And on the back of a lot of the knowledge that's out there, it's trained on thousands of real world configuration scenarios, whether it's from community, admin guides, issues faced by real customers, but most importantly, expert verified solutions, right? These are folks that have seen some of the challenges that are out in the field and have added some really unique ways to configure that go into the training corpus that the AI uses to help customers solve their own problems. So, that was the genesis for the business, and it's gone all over the place in terms of the potential. But right now, what we're seeing a lot of value in is helping customers really see around corners, cover knowledge gaps, and enable the AI to accelerate the way that you can go about solving Workday tasks and problems and clear through some of that backlog.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to quickly add, Christian,
Yeah, go for it.
if you remember with ChatGPT when it was released, it was the fastest growing consumer application ever. And
Yeah.
so, being at a venture capital firm, we sort of saw the dichotomy of it where it's like I would get texts on WhatsApp from my mom about like, hey, look at this like cool, funny joke ChatGPT can tell me. And then I would hear from software engineers at some of the world's best tech companies that we've invested in that they're using ChatGPT to generate code. Right. And it was very clear that, if engineers are able to augment their work and have a lot of leverage, the folks that are at the application level, the application administrators, we didn't have that leverage at the time, right? And the question then becomes like, hey, well, can ChatGPT answer those questions about applications? And that's where it gets tricky because, as you know, applications are configured all uniquely, right?
Yeah.
And each tenant is very different. And being able to actually ground knowledge from community, for example, which is theoretical knowledge from the Workday vendor saying this is how things should be done versus how things are actually done in the real world is really where, we saw that delta and we're like, hey, we can really build something exciting here.
Yeah, yeah. And listen, I am so glad that you all did. I probably should have led with this, but just so that everyone listening knows, I am currently, my organization that I work at is currently a Mando customer. And I am a very, very satisfied Mando customer. I love what you all are doing. It's been an incredible journey to watch the technology progress and get better in real time. Day to day, I can see where it's getting much more accurate, much better, and spitting out community articles that are like, yes, that's exactly what I was looking for. So I should have led with that. I appreciate the shirt. This is awesome as well. And we can get into a little bit of my thoughts, my practical uses on the system as well. But I think just to kind of double click on this, how would you describe Mando? How does it work? And I think more importantly, who is Mando for? Who are you all building this for?
Absolutely. Yeah, great question, Christian. Mando, first and foremost, is an AI co-pilot for Workday admins, right? We're focusing on the administrative use case, right? People that are configuring day in, day out, that are deep in BPs or integrations or security groups, and trying to make the system useful for the overall organization and really push the limits of what's possible with the broad surface area of what Workday provides, right? So, for example, when an admin has a question like, how do I retroactively calculate pay for mid-period terminations, right? What Mando does is it doesn't just summarize a document, it goes further and it walks through exact steps, uses real Workday syntax, and most importantly, it cites real configuration guidance, right? Then it goes further and gets a second opinion from some of the best Workday experts that are out there in the ecosystem who've seen similar problems in the past, right? And so this combination of AI and human knowledge is what makes Mando unlike any other AI product in the market, right? And whenever customers want to go deeper, they can instantly book a consultation or spin up a project with one of the best experts in the ecosystem. And these are all handpicked in real time by Mando, all with the lowest rates in the industry. So you really get top tier talent without the traditional staffing markup. So in summary, we've built a cutting edge AI architecture that blends the best of both worlds, right? The frontier AI technology that is able to retrieve the most relevant data sources for you just in time, complemented by real human experts that have seen problems that you're facing in the past and can really help you get across the finish line.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the merging of the two, right? You do have obviously a lot of technology. You're using a ton of AI behind the scenes, a ton of AI principles, right, that are cutting edge and like ever evolving. But you're also tapping into some of the best experts across the ecosystem as well to verify those answers. And even sometimes to like take it over the top, right? Like the combination of those two things are so amazing. And I can say this for, as a firsthand user, I am just blown away at not just the current state, but the potential of where this can go moving forward as the AI progresses across this year and in the future as well. So that is amazing.
Totally.
Neelan, do you have anything else to add there?
Yeah. I mean, I was gonna say, like, when you have a question on how to do something in Workday, it's either on the internet or it's not, right? And when it's not, when it's on the internet, you want to use AI to retrieve it, right? And when it's not on the internet, you ideally can use AI to match you with someone in real time who has that knowledge. And if you set up the incentives correctly, that person's incentivized to share that knowledge. When they share that knowledge, it trains the AI, so there's a network effect there. Every single expert that joins, every single customer that joins, the AI gets better, and it's a net positive for the ecosystem, right? So you can imagine a customer asking some sort of a calc field question, and when they're going and searching that up and they find the answer for it, they don't go and publish that anywhere, right? That knowledge kind of stays tribal to their organization, but when you're using something like Mando, it's democratized, right? So that's one of the most exciting things about the platform, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. One of the beautiful things about having a video podcast is we can always jump in and share visuals. So I would love to stop talking about this and start showing this because I trust me, I am so excited about what you guys have built here. So if you want, I can go ahead and share my screen and then we can talk through maybe a quick demonstration.
That'd be great.
Give me 1 second. All right, so I have my Mando up and running here. Let me go ahead and open up a brand new chat.
I had a quick question, actually, Christian. Before you even started using Mando, you probably noticed that the user interface resembles ChatGPT, right?
Yes.
And I don't know if you had ever used ChatGPT before, but curious about kind of like how intuitive it was for you to actually go and start asking questions at first. Probably because you had that leg up from using ChatGPT in the past, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it was very intuitive. But again, I am definitely like an AI super user. I would probably call myself. But I think even outside of that, I have a couple different coworkers who are also subscribed to Mando, and I did probably a not so great job of introducing that to them, and they were able to figure it out. No questions asked, no problems at all on their end. So it is very user friendly and very intuitive.
Love it. Well, I was thinking, Christian, you mentioned, I think a couple of weeks ago, one of those problems you ran into with, I think, quick links. And so maybe we could just kind of start there, right, with that query. I don't remember if it was exactly what it was something about a condition rule and quick links. But that might ring a bell and maybe something cool to demo.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I had an issue where I had to change a condition rule for a quick link because what we had built in the past was no longer applicable now, and we wanted to make sure that quick link was available to that to the correct condition group. So I think I asked something like, "How do you change the condition rule for a quick link?" Perfect. I will never get over how quickly this generates an answer. But for those on the video, you can go ahead and take a look at this. Generally speaking, it's going to it suggested that I use this task of create external link rule. I think this might be a little bit of a workaround, but I believe that I mean even now, right? Like this is just one of those tasks where you just don't do that frequently. Workday uses so many different terms in terms of maintain or manage. that it can be really, really difficult to remember what it is that you have to do. And here it is right here. This is the answer. You want to use the create, edit, view, external link rule in order to make that update in Workday. And with one click, was able to figure that out. And instead of taking 10 to 20 minutes to just find the correct answer through Community, it took me probably less than that to actually find it and fix it. So this was perfect.
I love that you mentioned like workarounds, right? Because if you go back to the Copilot, what I noticed is on the data sources, and this is kind of what me and Adi were talking about earlier with experts, right? So if you click on your data sources, if you scroll down, yeah, there we go. Tom verified that solution. It should show someone from Mando who's actually gone and seen this problem in the past, and they give the second opinion on exactly how they've solved it. And so it kind of gets you quickly to the answer with someone who's previously worked on that.
Yes. And how amazing is that, right? Just the use of AI and an expert in this field who can even add a little bit more color, a little bit more light to the answer. So I love this because, again, as someone who probably doesn't change condition rules on quick links on a regular basis, it's just so nice to be able to punch it into Mando and like have the confidence that this is going to be the answer. This is going to be the fastest way to find this answer.
How often, Christian, out of curiosity, are you going back to past threads, right? Because that's actually something we've seen from a lot of customers is almost like, and some of the features that we're working on is kind of creating Mando into like a growing knowledge base, right? Because people are going and putting in their real-time issues, and over time, the system learns, right? And so curious about how you've been using that past threads.
Absolutely. So this is a kind of a newer feature that you all added this year, but it's this search functionality. So I use this a lot. So I'll just click on this magnifying glass here, and I will just try to remember a key word or phrase that I entered into my initial query. So I remember that there was a query around studio, if I can spell, studio, and core connector. I wanted to see if I could take the output of a core connector integration and manipulate that in a studio integration. And so here's my query. So 2 clicks, right? I was able to find that old query of the answer for taking that output from a core connector and transforming that or doing something more to that in a studio integration.
Totally. And I think one of the also interesting things to highlight here, Christian, is your breadth across Workday, right? I feel like there are definitely teams where people are, for example, PAT focused or benefits focused, right? And it's like you're doing integrations, you're doing functional work as well. And so there's a lot of, context switching, right? Which I'm sure, makes the tool somewhat more useful for you, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the term Copilot here just applies way more than you'll ever know. In my case, at least, because I don't ever want to have just the community alone experience. I wish and I hope that I have Mando by my side throughout my entire career, right? Like once you experience this, having to search through community is just torture. Sorry, Workday.
Yeah. When we even launched the product, right? Like we had presented and met a lot of customers at Rising, and when we first started, we were internally debating like, hey, who would this actually be most useful for, right? Yeah. And naturally, it was the smaller teams that have to go cross module, right, and have to kind of dive into everything within Workday, and don't have the multiple AMS partners on retainer, right, that they can reach out to. So it's those lean, small but mighty teams, and folks like yourself that even want to, I know you code on the side, right, want to dive into the inner workings of Workday. It's like that curiosity, and that intersection is where we really see users, loving the product.
Absolutely, yeah. I do want to call out one instance where I just really, really fell in love with Mando and like had to credit you all for saving my butt on multiple occasions. So my manager is just a wealth of Workday knowledge. She is really a wizard. I don't understand how she's able to retain all this information across all these modules. She's just it is just so comforting to have her as part of the team. But imagine anytime she's on vacation, right? She's an essential part of our team with
Yeah.
so much, not just institutional knowledge, but like Workday knowledge.
Right.
So whenever she's on vacation, she just recently went on vacation about 2 months ago. And just in my usual panic, I'm getting requests, getting all of these cases, tickets across the organization about things that I don't normally cover, right? She would normally cover those. And dude, having Mando there was just a lifesaver and a half. To be able to punch in a query and maybe not necessarily get like a specific answer to a very nuanced situation that I was dealing with, but it got me looking in the right direction or using the right terms. Or, you know what? This article linked another article, right? That like was getting me steps in the right direction to solving that issue, that problem. So I honestly, after that week, I was just completely sold on this. And again, I have to say this. I don't ever want to, have access to community without having access to Mando. It's just night and day difference. There's just no way that that experience tops this in any way, shape, or form, in my opinion.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Christian, Workday continues to grow the surface area of product offerings and nuances with existing products. It continues to evolve, right? And the great thing with our technology is that we are constantly retraining the model, right, on not just what's been built out in the past, but also the latest in terms of the upcoming releases, right? And so this is a feature I think we talked about a couple of weeks ago, how we recently trained Mando AI on 2025 R1, and we have a lot of customers that were using Mando to help see around corners and prepare for that big release. And this happens twice a year, and it's a big moment for teams. There's sometimes a lot of panic and anxiety around how to prepare for it adequately. And the great part about the tool is that it's able to really cover those knowledge gaps and help you really hone in on the aspects of each release that are pertinent to your organization, right? And so we hope that the personalization continues to grow over time as the tool learns how you work and how the organization wants to maximize use of Workday. But again, it's really cool to be able to work with you and see how you've used the product. And again, it's a partnership between AI and also your work stream, right? And it's cool to see how Mando's been able to interleave into your work stream and provide assistance when it's pertinent, and then kind of be behind the scenes, right? And act more as a knowledge repository when you need to look up something you already queried in the past, right? And so I think both of those use cases are really helpful for us to understand and think about as we look at the future growth of the product.
Absolutely. Yeah. If I can be completely open and honest, right? And this is a conversation that I've had with you all. I think initially, I'll just be real, and maybe I'm being a little bit too harsh here, but sometimes the knowledge in community just doesn't feel like it's worthwhile, right? So community isn't necessarily kind of a sole place that I try to troubleshoot and find my information. And so I think one of my initial concerns with Mando was the content in community being the ceiling here. But you all recently released a feature that has completely erased that doubt and that concern from me, and that was the expert verified answers. So I had asked a question. We're recently implementing employment agreements, and so there's this prompt that's now showing up on our hire business process for employment agreement prompt details. And this is something that's just recently popped up just with this change that we didn't necessarily consider. So I wanted to see if there's a way to remove that. And based off of what I had already seen about the setup, it didn't look like there was. But so I punched it into Mando just to be super, super sure. And I got this expert verified answer that pretty much confirmed there might be a quick way to work around it. But if not, we'll probably have to work with Workday support in order to make that happen, right? And again, very, very much in line with what I had already seen, just setting that process up. But having this, I think I mentioned it to you too, like this, like it almost feels like Christmas, getting those notifications in my email inbox that, an expert has verified an answer for me on a past query. It definitely just feels like Christmas. I get to open that up and learn a little bit more about how the process works. And for some of my queries, it's kind of taken the solution over the top. Things that I would have never even considered, and kind of refining what it is that Mando initially sent me as an article or solution. Have been really, really impressed by this feature here.
Yeah, one of the things we do is we showcase the experts, right, that have obviously, given that knowledge, because in some cases customers want to go back and forth with them, right? Like there is a nuanced solution that they've given. It goes into more detail. They're like, hey, I want to chat with this person, right? So, we recently enabled live chat, we enabled bookings, and so it's been interesting to see how customers interact with experts when they get these expert verified answers and they want to go deeper, right? Kind of going back to the earlier point, which is like, every tenant's unique. Everyone has a unique configuration build, right? So
yes. Again, I hope I never have to go without Mando. And I think I am extremely excited to see where this is headed in the future as well, right? It'll be really, really exciting to see what all the creative things that you all come up with. So I have a lot of questions. I definitely want to take it from the perspective of like a top level executive, maybe an HRIS director who is trying to get ahead of the curve here and trying to understand what action to take and when to take it. So I think a super high place to start here is how much of the AI news right now is hype and how much of it is like real and actionable?
Yeah, great question. So, we'll be the first to tell you that honestly, we're living through a time unlike any other. I think the mainstream is starting to really feel that in day-to-day use of AI applications, whether it's ChatGPT or Google Deep Research. There's a lot of new AI applications that are coming to the forefront. And for the first time, AI is legitimately capable of solving some really impactful problems for knowledge workers, right? And so it's a really unique time to be building in this space, and also to being able to use the latest and greatest technology. But however, with any technology wave, right, there's a lot of hype out there for sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of AI products that are pushed onto customers that are honestly no more than GPT wrappers, which are products that really just echo the functionality of ChatGPT in a slightly different user interface. And I'm sure, Christian, you've seen how for a complex Workday question, ChatGPT just doesn't cut it, right? It's very, very surface level. It's really just kind of scraping across a variety of very, shallow sources in the broad pool of internet knowledge. And so really the way we think about it is focusing on the use case, right? And the key part of the process that a lot of these products miss is avoiding hallucinations, is what they call it in the AI world, right? And this is when an AI will project confidence about an answer, but it doesn't have any basis for that answer, right? And unlike those AI products, Mando grounds all of its answers in Workday documentation, right? Or real human expertise. And so every answer has citations back to a data source, whether it's a document from Workday Community or an individual who's contributed a verified solution. And it really gives you the confidence in the accuracy of those answers, right? And again, we take it one step further by corroborating that answer across a network of experts, right? And trying to build up consensus and get a second and third opinion on a particular perspective, right? And so an analogy I think that might be helpful here is you think of the off-the-shelf LLMs like ChatGPT. I like to think of them as almost like overconfident, friends that have a surface level understanding of a lot of different things, right? So kind of trivia experts, but a jack of all trades and a master of none, right? So when you talk to an individual like that, folks will probably have an experience where you're talking to someone that's overconfident, confidently states what is actually inaccurate to avoid admitting ignorance, right? But the way that we've designed our product is much more like a librarian, right? And so when you ask a librarian a particular question, right, a research question, that individual will go and retrieve trustworthy documents and assemble a precise, accurate answer, and then also call out where there are some gaps, right? Where, that book might be checked out right now, right? Or there's a new body of knowledge that has to be kind of built out. And so that shift in mindset and that differentiation is really what makes Mando a very practical tool for Workday admins. And not to say that there's no value in those more general purpose AI tools, but they're not as practical for knowledge work, right? And so that's what we've seen in the field. And so in situations where accuracy and reliability really matter, again, it's far safer to trust a librarian that double checks the accuracy of their answers than an overconfident friend that's just trying to convince you they're the smartest out there, right? And so just a helpful analogy to kind of think about where things are in the AI world. But in terms of our architecture, right, the way we think about things is really focusing on the highest quality data that's available, and then manufacturing new data where it's needed. And what sets us apart is that we focus on the intersection of three different pools of knowledge, right? The first pool, as you pointed out, is the technical documentation that we pull from official Workday sources, right? Community, admin guides, release center, et cetera. But again, this is a theoretical knowledge about what's possible in Workday. And so the second pool of knowledge is the very practical knowledge about how to configure. And this comes from the Workday experts, a network of experts we've assembled that take that high level answer and take it across the finish line. And this manifests in the form of expert verified answers, as you pointed out, or expert answers and solutions that are contributed and sourced directly in the AI. And then the third pool of knowledge that we're just starting to get into more is the personalized context from customer tenants, right? And so when you bring these three pools of knowledge together, it creates this very, very unique experience that's unlike anything out on the market right now. And so to answer your initial question, Christian, a lot of AI demos are hype, but what we're focusing on is utility. And that's why we were very quiet about what we were building until we felt a lot of confidence that this is going to provide a lot of value to Workday admins. And so, what we're seeing in the field right now is, Mando off the bat eliminates the need to hunt for answers on Community. You pointed that out, right? It's become an alternative to, trying to go and comb through a bunch of different articles on Community. And what we've also seen is that it reduces ticket resolution time by up to 50%. And this is just a V1. We have a lot in the roadmap for later this year that we're really excited about. But it really starts with a difference in how we build the foundation of the product, as opposed to just trying to wrap an AI that's out there with a different kind of skin and call it our product, right?
Yeah, the original question that you asked is so interesting, right? It's like, what's real? Because there's so much noise. How do you differentiate from the signal and the noise? And there's been a lot of buzz around like agentic AI, right?
Yes.
And being able to have an AI that effectively takes over your browser, right? And then it's doing steps on its own. But I think, where the practicality comes into play is how would it know the steps, right? The steps have to be well defined. And if again, right, the tenants are uniquely configured, everyone's going to have different steps. And so that's kind of like, the direction that we're taking, where it's like, the interface is text-based. We're trying our best not to get distracted by all the new agentic technology that's coming out, because we want to make sure we nail the steps right first, right? And get that in the hands of the customers. And then from there, start introducing automation in their day-to-day.
Yeah. Let's get into that if you're okay with that.
Sure.
I know that this is just an ever-evolving industry, but is there anything that's on the roadmap that you all feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah, absolutely. So Neelan kind of hinted at it, and we take these updates very seriously, which means a lot of this is in the lab right now, but I'll kind of share a sneak peek, which is thinking really critically around what does AI-led configuration look like, right? And so if you fast forward to where the technology is likely to be by the end of this year, next year, we are going to start to see AI take actions on behalf of knowledge workers, right? And so we are positioning our platform in a manner that can use the latest and greatest frontier technology in a safe way, in a way that is sandboxed, is secure, and it accomplishes what you're setting out to accomplish, right? And so today, Mando is a question in, answer out platform, as Neelan mentioned, but tomorrow it will be a question in, action out platform, right? And so what we're doing is we're building out our agentic architecture internally so that Mando can safely navigate the Workday interface to help you start doing basic repetitive tasks like automating tests, simulating changes in Sandbox, and starting to deploy some real configuration changes in, again, a very safe manner for you and the team. And the cool part here is getting into the true personalization element of things. So as we start to deploy some of this agentic technology, Mando will integrate with your Workday tenant, to enable the answers to become even more personalized about how your tenant is configured. So everything down to how individual worker objects are configured and the custom fields, to understanding the audit trail and really being able to kind of rewind time and see why a particular decision was made. Really, the goal here is to provide as much visibility as possible through time, and enable you to get through that backlog twice as fast with fewer errors, right? And this is where the translation of what we have today to tomorrow with agentic AI is going to make an even bigger impact on teams like yours, Christian.
I actually wanted to add something really quickly there, Christian, is like another thing with AI getting really good is, there's been sort of like, one of my friends is a teacher, for example, right? And he's like, yeah, I swear that, people, students are using AI, and I feel like my students are just, using it and not actually learning, right? And I think like, as people are making AI products, right, it's very important for us that we actually make sure that the product transfers knowledge to the human. Because at the end of the day, the human is who's going to be managing the AI, whether it's an agent, whether it's a chat bot, it's going to be leveraged by the person that's managing it. And so making sure that every single time the AI does go and either take an action or solve something on its own, that it's able to be retrieved by everyone on the team, everyone's able to see step by step what it did, that's incredibly important. And I think one of the coolest things with Mando that we didn't really expect was sort of like the training use case, right? Like as you're using it, you start to learn more about Workday, right? And you start to get more curious. Like we had one of our folks who's never touched integrations before, right? Who's I think a benefits person who was able to build their first integration, right? And
That's awesome.
when you're able to do that, yeah, you're able to actually, learn, and then you have that knowledge to reference again if you want to, come back to it in the future, right? So I think things like that right now we're seeing, early sort of signs of that in the product, and we want to actually take that to the product team, figure out how to build that into a world-class experience, right? And that's also stuff that's definitely on the roadmap alongside all of the cool agentic, actionable tech.
Oh man, I'm gonna make a mental note of that because that is just one of those use cases where I would have never thought. So that is creative. I love that. That is amazing. So I think one of the things that I also wanted to touch on is security. I am a really, really big fan of your approach here from a security standpoint. So obviously, any LLM that you interact with in the wild, has the potential to kind of house that data, and it's kind of a black box from there. You just don't really know how the data is being handled on the back end. Mm-hmm. Can you speak to how you all are handling security and handling customer data here?
Absolutely, great question. So again, because this is an enterprise AI product, right? Security is super important to us, and so it starts with ensuring that all of the query patterns are firewalled to the specific account from which they originate. So as that personalization builds up, that personalization is retained for just your organization, right? And so every account's Mando instance, every organization's Mando instance is slightly different, right? The feedback, the responsive kind of elements, and even the experts that are suggested end up being very personalized to the types of workloads and the types of use cases that emerge from that organization. And so the way we operate is we use exclusively open source language models for the concerns that you described earlier, Christian. We, for better or for worse, don't necessarily know with the closed source models if our queries are being trained on. And so out of an abundance of caution, we focus on only using open source models. We lock them down in our cloud infrastructure. And so we ensure that those queries are staying within our kind of four walls in the cloud. And again, we partition each of our accounts so that your queries stay yours, and then another organization stays theirs. And from a functionality standpoint, it only enhances the personalization to keep these separated, right? To ensure that the nuances of your organization play out for the rest of your team, and in a very different way from a different organization. And so there's and as AI matures and as there's more interfaces that have to get integrated, that security footprint can over time grow, right? And so as we're starting to think about agentic AI, that's one of the reasons we didn't want to prematurely start rolling out products in the way that a lot of other companies tend to just ship demos, and they don't oftentimes think about the depth of security that's required. We are ensuring that when we do a big rollout with agentic AI, that it's done the right way, and we're able to piggyback off of the security model that Workday provides its customers, right? Because Workday's thought about a lot of these different use cases and implications of how security needs to operate internally. And so we're kind of taking a page from Workday and ensuring that we can inherit a lot of those principles in our architecture, and then kind of build on them as we kind of layer on the right agentic AI techniques. So it's something that's really important to us, and that's why we would rather double check and dot our I's, cross our T's when we roll things out, as opposed to put something out there that might have some potential security holes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you guys are for sure not a GPT wrapper, right? Like this isn't something that is just secretly using GPT or, some other closed model that's just sending that out, bringing it back and spitting out an answer. You all have kind of a security around what it is that you're building. These open source models are amazing for that. And I just really love that creative approach here.
Absolutely. And just to double click on that, Christian, right, when you talk about the architecture itself, I think it might be helpful to break down, again, some distinctions between the closed source vendors and why we elect to use an open source language model, right? Primarily, it's because we can integrate that language model at the point in the stack that makes the most sense for the highest quality output for customers. And so just to kind of give you a brief tour of our architecture, right, at kind of a bird's eye view level, our tech stack includes a large scale data extraction pipeline, right? It enables us to train Mando AI on the latest Workday knowledge. And so this is an ongoing process. We are constantly, ingesting the latest and greatest as we possibly can into the AI to train on. And then we couple that with a retrieval engine to, rank the very best data sources so that any user query is met with the highest quality context. And then we have a fine-tuned router that dynamically selects the best language model from an inventory of open source language models, right? And so we don't actually use a single open source model. We actually use a family of different language models that we route to based on the type of query you're asking. Because what we're seeing in the AI world is that every model has its sweet spot, and there are some aspects of language models that that are actually not very performant. And so what we do is we have this dynamic router that enables you to really maximize the quality of the answer based on the input you're providing. And so that's just a really quick and dirty tour through our AI stack, but that's also part of the reason why we necessarily have to adopt this approach, because we want to have that optionality in that part of the stack so that we can pick the very best open source model for the type of question you're asking that produces the answer you're looking for.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the saying of having the right person in the right seat of the bus, you all are essentially doing that with these open sourced AI models, right? You're picking the right person, the right LLM for the job here. Totally. I love that. I'm glad that you called that out, because that's really, really creative as well. So I do want to jump back into kind of the perspective of an HRIS leader. Sure. I think generally speaking, right, I think anyone who can tell you, where this whole thing is going to land in terms of AI functionality, tools that are going to be available, they're lying, right? Like, I think people may have certain bets, may have certain ideas. And I think in the midst of all of that nuance, there's still a lot of principles and guiding actions that we can take, right, and focus on. Yeah. So if you do get a chance to connect with maybe like a CHRO or like an HRIS director, what would be your recommendations in terms of actions that they should be taking in this developing like AI world and space?
And quick follow-up on that, Christian, is specific to Workday or in general, right? Like,
yeah, I think we can touch on both.
Sure.
But yeah, assuming that they are a Workday customer to some extent.
Yeah, well, I would say specific to Workday, right? If you look at the Workday ecosystem, it's very mature, right? It's actually why a lot of customers want to use Workday. There's a lot of partners, a lot of support, a lot of resources. And when a lot of customers already have AMS providers, they have AMS partners. And so some people might look at a tool like Mando and be like, hey, what's the purpose of using something like this? And generally when we're in conversations with C-level executives or folks that are owning an HR budget, that's their pushback. And the way we see it is, hey, if you're going to have an AI tool that's out there, truly use it, see if you like it, right? And that's what's going to make you want to adopt it, right? So it was a bit of a challenge at first, because internally we're like, hey, do we let people have a free trial of this product? Do we even let them access it? We know quality of the AI answers gets way better when it's integrated with the tenant. But there's phases to that, right? So it's kind of like, hey, first use this as a sidecar to your AMS provider. See if your team can actually get to resolution on their own, right? By giving all the knowledge, in their fingertips. And once you're able to actually do that, you're able to actually see some value out of it. Then figure out how we can actually integrate Mando into your tenant, and then so on and so forth. So for Mando's specific example, that's kind of how we think about telling leaders that are a little bit AI averse, or hey, I already have like budgeted for AMS for this quarter, right? We're kind of like, hey, use it in accordance with your AMS provider. There's a lot of customers that we have that still have AMS partners and use Mando as well, and they're super happy. But on a more general standpoint, right, what I would say is, there's a whole new wave of workforce that's coming in, right? There's a lot of people, especially in college right now, that are being trained that are consistently using AI tools, right? And then when they come into the workforce, all of a sudden, there's a redactment of these tools. You're not able to use these tools. There's a lot of enterprises where ChatGPT is not even allowed to even be on the network, right? And if they see that, it's an issue. And so what I would say there is try and figure out, ChatGPT obviously has its issues with it being a black box closed model, but when you have enterprise AI ready solutions, right, figure out if there's a way to try it out, if there's a way to get in the hands of folks in your organization that are very tech forward, because it is something that's happening, right? The analogy that I always give is like, if you were really a good accountant back in the day, right, and you were incredible at mental math, you probably were one of the best accountants, right? And then when the calculator comes along, you don't want to just keep doing mental math, right? And so there is a shift that's happening, and it's almost inevitable. We're seeing it in all walks of knowledge work, especially software engineering. And Adi can probably speak to this a little bit more closely than me, but I think it was a crazy stat that was put out by Y Combinator, which is the number one accelerator in the world, that 90% of the code that is in the code bases of their cohort was generated by AI. Right, and it's people that are actually using these tools to go and create real products. And so, sure, that's happening at the programming layer. How long is it going to take to get to the application layer? Applications like Workday, ServiceNow, Salesforce, et cetera. Right, so that's kind of the way I would think about it, is like adoption friendly, but also with some caution, right? Knowing that there are some tools here that aren't enterprise ready, they're not secure, they're using closed models. So that's my take on it. Adi, I'm not sure if you had anything you wanted to add.
Yeah, I think at an even higher level than that, right? I think there's a few ways to prepare an organization for this upcoming shift, right? And these are just some tips that I think will set an organization up for success as AI tools proliferate in the market. So one is to get really good about how your knowledge is stored, and documentation, right? Because the key to AIs being able to understand you is if you can provide that context to the AI, right? And so if that paper trail is really messy, if it's very hard to assemble why a decision was made and when it was made and who made that decision, it's just very, very hard for you to get that extra mileage from an AI that's trying to piece together all these different data points, right? But if you do have even just a lightweight process or discipline to assembling knowledge internally, as simple as just, this is a folder where we're going to, memorialize certain decisions that are made on a monthly basis or weekly basis, right? That can set you up for a very, very successful rollout of AI when you do have things like infinite memory that are inevitably going to come to the forefront, right? So that's one thing I think about, which is just how do you improve the hygiene of knowledge sharing and documentation internally? The second thing is, like Neelan mentioned, getting your hands on the tools in a safe kind of trialed manner, and just to prepare yourself with how these user experiences operate is super important. Right now, we're seeing a proliferation of kind of chat interfaces, but that's likely going to change as AI goes from a purely text-based experience to something that's a little bit more dynamic, with browser automation and agentic and computer use taking over. And so I think just being comfortable and aware of what's going on is half the battle, right, Christian? I mean, fortunately, you're also at the frontier, and I know you enjoy kind of taking a look at these tools. But I think that something that overall broadly organizations should also consider, just in the back of their minds, finding opportunities to give AI a shot, right? Even if it's on a weekend for a side project or a hobby, or even things like dieting or cooking or projects on the side, right? That's where I think you might be pleasantly surprised with what's possible with AI technology. And then the last thing I'll say is that in any organization, there are repetitive, costly, and error-prone processes, right? And sometimes it takes a little bit of introspection to really think through what those processes are. But when they appear, when you start to experience that frustration, I think just going back to documenting, like there's probably room for improvement here, right? And just putting that on the shelf and constantly looking at what's on that shelf, right? Because over time, there's a good chance that AI is going to be able to take something off that shelf and really run with it and automate a significant portion of that, which will lead to just improved employee satisfaction. No one really wants to be doing repetitive, mundane work over and over again, especially if it's error prone. And so I think just kind of assembling that inventory of where there's potential for AI to really make a difference for an organization can set a team up for success. But those are just some things that come to mind.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that you called that out because that's actionable now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Regardless
Yeah.
of where this AI thing goes, like it is absolutely necessary to take into consideration what it is that you all need to do your job from a knowledge management perspective, right? That is going to be key because as helpful and as standard as that is for you to do your own job, that's going to be even more so for an agent that is going to help you do that job, right? And I think that's just definitely like a practical action that you can take at this point. There is a blog post by Anthropic in regards to building AI agents, all the different types of agents that all the patterns that you can build out. And I've found it to be fascinating because there's one of the more basic patterns, I believe it's like the augmented LLM pattern or whatever, had mentioned this topic, right? The data retrieval. But then there's also the mention of tools, right? And I think that's just as important as well, right? To understand if we do transition into this world of agents, we, along with the knowledge base that they will need access to, we also have to understand what tools they'll need access to as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And from a security standpoint, from a building standpoint, like those are going to be hurdles that have to get crossed as well.
Totally.
So, example, right? Creating synchronizing cases in your case management system, right? That's going to be an external tool that your agent may need access to if there's a workflow that involves that. So again, these are all things that are probably going to be constants now, regardless of where this AI thing ends up going. So taking into consideration those things, right? The knowledge base, what is it that we need to do our job from a knowledge perspective and from a tool perspective. If you can document that, have a good record of like, this is what the workflow looks like. These are the steps that we would want, the job done in, regardless if it's a human or an LLM or a combination of the two. I think that is going to best prepare people for whatever it is to come, later this year or even, in the near future. So, am I good on that theory? Where are the holes there?
No, absolutely. I think you're spot on, right? And I like to think in terms of these analogies or metaphors, right? And so one I typically reach for is think of an AI that you use as almost like a intern or as someone somewhat junior level of the team, junior member of the team that has unbounded memory, right? And no need for lunch breaks. They're always on. They're always available, but they do start with a somewhat blank slate of context that it's your responsibility to go and fill, right? And as you fill it with that structure, with that context, that's when you start to see this relatively junior level team member grow into a medium level contributor to maybe even a true co-pilot, a true clone of what an individual could do. And again, you don't have to really worry about the running time of those AI tools. They can be running 24/7. They can be running in the background. You can have several of them, but that buildup of that knowledge is really important, and making sure that you feed in high quality data. That tends to be where some of these endeavors can go off the rails, right? There's a
Yeah.
saying in AI that, garbage in, garbage out, right? So if you're just
Yes.
filling in very, very messy, unstructured data that has a lot of noise in it, it's frankly unfair to expect the AI to do much with that, right? But if you take a little bit of care in preparing that data, to organizing it correctly, and then leveraging AI, the frontier AI technology to provide that leverage on the back end, then that's where I think you can see really promising results. And so we've also seen that internally, right? When we were building Mando, right? When we take even more care in topic modeling, organizing these different sources of data, ensuring that even things like the fragments that we are using when we're retrieving context are sized appropriately. Those individual details tend to really add up because we're talking about large scale retrieval, large scale AIs that are combing over thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of different documents, right? So
Yeah.
just some things to keep in mind as you kind of go about your AI journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do want to now like take this from the context of like the individual Workday admin out there. What are the top skills that you would recommend for them to focus on as we start to transition into this like AI world? Do you have any recommendations? Anything that people should be focusing on here?
Well, I have a really quick answer, but I'll let Neelan maybe add some more. I think what you're doing, Christian, that's phenomenal, right? Getting in the trenches, like starting to play around with some of these tools, doing some light scripting and hacking around on the technology itself. That's very inspirational, and it gets me excited as someone that's been in the space for some time. So I just wanted to jump in and say that I think what you're doing is setting a great example for the rest of the ecosystem. But I'll let Neelan maybe share some more thoughts about that.
Yeah, yeah. I think a good analogy here would be like the programming world, right? And it's like, hey, if the programming world is getting increasingly automated, and we know that eventually the application administration world is going to get increasingly automated, what's happening with programming, right? And what I think the skills that are going to be valuable are going to be very applicable to both. And what we're seeing right now with programmers is some programmers I know, they have like a voice to transcription tool that they're using. They don't even touch the keyboard. They speak to the LLM, and they have an IDE like Cursor that has, or Windsurf that has AI baked into it. And they're effectively doing this process called vibe coding. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Oh,
There's like
yeah.
been coined this term. I think Andre Karpathy coined the term,
Yeah.
and now it's like super super popular. But what's interesting there is like the people that are actually good vibe coders, right, are actually not really vibe coding. They're giving very meticulous prompts. They're able to communicate extremely clearly because at the end of the day, the medium of exchange is tokens, i.e., letters of or words of the English language, right? And so, or whatever language you're actually using the module in, right, or the model in. So I think it's very important to have clear communication, right? And that's something that as a personal skill, people should be able to take on, being able to explain concepts very clearly or ask questions in a very meticulous way. And it's not something that's just useful for AI. It's also very useful if you have a net new team member joining, right? And so
Yeah.
it's kind of a net positive, right? That these AI tools are a forcing function for people to actually communicate more clearly. And then I think, going back to what Adi mentioned, right? Consistent documentation. And AI tools are really helping automate a lot of this. And there's definitely stuff we're cooking up on the lab around that. We colloquially internally call it autodocs, but imagine like, being able to, use a tool like Mando and then being able to hit export and then boom, you have like very clear steps that you can go and just give to someone else on the team. They understand exactly what you did. And now that lives forever, right? Within the AI's memory base and then also within the company's knowledge base. And I would say probably the last thing is just getting down and dirty with the models themselves or with software itself and doing some light scripting, data modeling, right? Seeing how these things actually work. Because the most frustrating thing is if you're relying a lot on an AI tool and you don't actually understand what's going on under the hood, right? If you can't actually go and troubleshoot and figure out what's going on. And in the Workday world, what I would say is important is like a configuration, being able to explain why a configuration works the way it does, right? And that's all super useful information, not just for an AI, but for yourself and for your team, right? So that's kind of what I would say.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think to kind of add on to that, I can absolutely see a world where like the people who can best understand processes and procedures, they are going to be incredibly valuable, right? So I know that there's like a current argument being made in the programming world of like, is AI going to take out all developers?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it just going to take out those junior developers, right? And those senior developers are going to become even more essential to organizations because they know the processes. They know how to prompt these LLMs and how to maximize their responses, right? And minimize their hallucinations as well. So
Yeah.
I can absolutely see that on the ERP world as well, right? Like these people who know the policies, procedures, know the configuration inside and out, they are going to be absolutely essential because they'll be the ones training the agents. They'll be the ones troubleshooting the agents as well. And I think if people can take away anything, like I would definitely recommend that, like know your processes, because if you don't, your AI agent will not, your AI tools will not as well. So
Totally. Yeah, it's actually
yeah.
like, when you think about Mando itself as a company, we rely on our Workday subject matter expertise from our network of experts, right? The independent
Yeah.
consultants that we've gone and, over the last year and a half have been recruiting and working really closely with. That's where the Workday knowledge comes from. But we as a company, we're all software engineers, right? Internally, like team of
Yeah.
software engineers, we have a very rigorous software engineering process. Adi, if you want to chat to sort of like, when we have a complex coding question, we've seen a lot of candidates, they'll go and they'll just instantly, throw basically the entire question into AI and then start trying to figure it out from there. But I know Adi personally, right? How he uses AI tools. It's very different, right? It's
Yeah.
basically using AI for only a certain part of
Yes.
a
Yeah.
sub function or looking for certain syntax, and not actually giving it more than it can handle because Adi understands the process. But Adi, I don't know if you want to add any more color on that.
Yeah, and I think this is where I've noticed in just my friend group, right? Folks that are less on the technical side can get a little dejected by seeing these like flashy demos and then trying it out themselves and having a very underwhelming experience. Because again, it goes to kind of what Neelan was talking about earlier. If you have a very vague requirement and you don't add that context, you don't add that grounding, you don't add examples of what you're looking for, then it can lead to a subpar experience with the AI. But I guess I think what Neelan's talking about in my day to day is I try to set the AI up for success, right? So give it a
Yes.
requirement, give some examples, give some grounding, and really think about, if I was in the shoes of the AI, right? If I was trying to take this recipe and really construct something that was high quality, would it really be possible for me to do that? Or am I just kind of copy pasting a bunch of different things, slapping it together? It's very vague. It's very confusing to even understand what the goal is, what the objective is, because then you're setting yourself up to fail, right? On the
Right.
downstream side of things. So I do think treating it with some care and almost putting yourself in the shoes of an omniscient AI that has access to all the different tools, all the different resources, but really needs to understand, like, are you trying to go north or northeast or west altogether? Like, giving that directionality is very important. And so another technique I like to do a lot when I'm using AI tools is just give a couple examples, right? Like give an example of, like, this is what I'm looking for, right? In this shape of data or this kind of syntax or this kind of structure. And I see a lot of phenomenal results just with adding a little bit of context around what the output shape should look like, right? And so I think just specificity, precision in how you ask for what you're looking for can go a very, very long way, right? And I think that's what's starting to separate the folks that are very, very excited about AI, right, and are becoming evangelists from those are a little bit more cynical, right, and don't really see the
Yeah.
promise in the tools. And I think that chasm is only going to increase over time, right? And I think it's our responsibility to really showcase what the magic of these tools is, right? And I think it just requires a little bit of training around, okay, thinking about prompting, thinking about precision, thinking about how you can really set the AI up for success, right, as opposed to just giving it something that's almost, it's never really going to have a chance of even understanding and comprehending, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So many things that you just mentioned that I could like branch off in. But from a practical, actionable perspective, what I'm taking away from what you just said is empathy definitely matters, right? And that's a skill that
Mm-hmm.
you can take away and practice here. Um, I think in my limited experience in scripting and working with an LLM through an API, it's really, really fascinating how much context you have to provide in order to get a specific answer or even to set guardrails
Mm-hmm.
around the responses back. Something as simple as like, how you respond to people within a certain context.
Hmm.
It feels so obvious to you, but you have to think with empathy. You are meeting the task at a very specific point of your life, and you've had all these years to
That's right.
develop that context, right? To say, you know what, in this conversation, I don't say this, right? But that LLM does not have that context, right?
Right.
It does not have that. And so you do have to put yourself in the shoes of this incredibly intelligent thing, and know that there's still so much social context, so much just life experience, street smart per se, that it just will not have, and you have to provide that context to them, right? But
Totally.
all of that is developed through interacting with these LLMs.
That's right.
To kind of a point that you mentioned previously, every LLM has like a specialty as well, right?
Hmm.
So some
Hmm.
things are really, really good at very specific tasks, while others are not. And even knowing that context as well is extremely important. But I would encourage anyone who's just been hesitant up until this point, please go try it. Please go taste it. Please get better here, because it's only going to set you up for whenever these tools become better and much more readily available.
I'm actually really curious, Christian, since you brought it up, right? You mentioned you're doing some light scripting and hacking on the side. What models do you use? Is it the Anthropic family of models, Claude
Oh my
3.5
goodness.
Sonnet? Is that the one that you found most helpful for you?
So, from a like chatbot perspective,
Uh-huh.
I love Claude.
Yeah.
Love Claude.
Hmm.
It is amazing, and I mean, if I can control it, it's my go-to.
Hmm.
From a scripting perspective, I have just stuck with OpenAI's model, and I mean, I should really just switch to Claude. It's about like priced around the same, so I really should switch to Claude. But I think generally speaking, I've had great experiences there, and I'm actually not quite sure if there would be a differences in terms of like kind of coaching it to not do certain things or not respond in certain ways. But yeah, that'll definitely be like an experiment that I continue to run across this year.
Absolutely. And these models are there's ebbs and flows to these models as well. But what I find in practice is that for software engineering, for coding, and I think I'm speaking on behalf of our AI team, that the Claude family of models does a phenomenal job, right? Especially over time as you give it adequate context about the software you're writing. Now, the challenge with these LLMs is that while Claude is very good for general purpose coding, when it comes to workday administration, all bets are off, right? Because it doesn't
Yes.
really have that grounding into what is possible in Workday, what has been done before, how do you apply it to this particular industry or this headcount or this domain. And so again, that's where it's important to think about what tool is right for the job, right? For general purpose software engineering, we're finding that the Cloud Anthropic family of models is a pretty great companion. When it comes to Workday admin work, you really want to have a different kind of grounding, right? A grounding that's based in official documentation, and then also the knowledge that you can take advantage of from the very best in the ecosystem, right? What others have done in
Yeah.
the past that has worked or maybe not worked, right? And so that's the relevant corpus of knowledge for Workday admin work, whereas for different kinds of work, it's different tools, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Let's go ahead and land this plane because I could talk to you guys forever, forever. So, just generally speaking, is there any piece of advice that you would give to somebody in the ecosystem just trying to move forward in their career?
100%. Yeah, I'm Adi. If you have anything you want to say, feel free to chime in. Yeah, I would say like don't wait for permission to learn, right? Tinker, play around with new tools, ask questions, learn how the Workday configuration works underneath the UI itself, like maintain that intellectual curiosity. Document, 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 try and write everything down like you're almost writing for your future self, for your future team. And
Yeah.
if you're like Christian, you're learning to code on the side, keep going, right? Because you're not just an admin anymore. You're the future of what a Workday platform architect will look like, right? And so, yeah, that's kind of what I would say, Adi. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Honestly, I was going to echo a lot of what you said there, so I'll mostly leave it at that. And I guess wanted to express excitement about where we are in the overall kind of life cycle of AI, right? I really do think we're on the verge of replacing the traditional support model, and leveraging AI to empower teams to equip themselves with the most relevant knowledge just in time, right, when they need it. And so with the pace of AI as it is today, right, I don't see customers in the future opening a support ticket and waiting for hours for an answer. I really do think that AI is going to be able to provide that answer real time, and over time also adapt to understand the nuances of what you're looking for, and then as a byproduct, teach other team members about what you've learned right then and there, right? And so, I think that the folks that are able to get ahead of the curve, right, and start familiarizing themselves with the tools are going to be set up for success. And really, the exciting thing is that the barrier to entry is so low, right? It's very easy to just pick these things up and start using them. And I think what I would say to folks that have maybe been a little dejected by their first go round is give it another shot, right? And think about how you might be able to clarify your requests and be precise about what you're looking for. Because I think when that happens, what we typically see is folks are blown away by the possibilities, right? And so just some kind of thoughts that come to mind around what we're discussing today.
Absolutely. I'm not sure that you all would communicate this, and so I'm going to attempt to. I think you guys are just getting started. Following the AI world, knowing what's out there, knowing what's available, knowing our previous conversations, I'm not sure that the ecosystem can imagine what you guys are building in the lab right now. So I am so excited to see what's happening. So excited to see what you guys are testing, and excited to see what you all unleash, because I am confident that it's going to be quality, and I'm confident that you're going to take away a lot of the manual heavy lifts that we have to do in the ecosystem, so that we can focus on the good stuff, the configuration, the architecting, the conversations with stakeholders, right? Like that's the important stuff that we should be investing our time. So I am just absolutely thrilled. So last question, in case anyone is curious to try out Mando, or if anyone has any AI questions that they want to connect with you all about, what would be the best place for them to reach out to you?
Absolutely. So we're online at mando.work, and you can also find us on LinkedIn. You can just search for my name, Adi or Aditya Viswanathan. It's a mouthful, so I'm sure Christian will drop it in the comments here on the podcast, and you can find Neelan on LinkedIn as well. And as you can tell, we love to nerd out about this stuff. So even if it's not really Workday related, if it's just generally questions and thoughts about AI, hopefully you can tell from this conversation, Christian, that I just love going down the rabbit hole and talking about what's going on in this space. And so feel free to reach out, DM us on LinkedIn, and we love to talk about things in the Workday ecosystem, things about AI, things in between. So feel free to reach out anytime.
Awesome. I really, really appreciate it, guys. I hope that this is a conversation, one of many down the road, because 2025 is already off to a ridiculous start from an AI perspective. So can't wait to see, can't wait to look back on this conversation, kind of see our predictions play out. But yeah, no, I really, really appreciate all that you guys are doing. Keep up the great work. And thanks for saving my butt on multiple occasions. So I really, really appreciate it.
And thank you for giving us a shot, Christian. It's been really inspiring to see how you use the product, and we're excited to get your hands on the latest and greatest as soon as we get it out of the lab.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for listening to this conversation. Be sure to check out the helpful links and resources mentioned in the conversation in the podcast show notes below. Also, be sure to connect with me on LinkedIn and Twitter to stay in the loop about future podcast episodes and Workday tips. I'm Christian Delcid on LinkedIn and at cdelcid21 on Twitter/X. I would love to hear any feedback about how to make this podcast better, so be sure to subscribe, connect with me, comment, and share with others. Thank you so much again. Have a great day. The Unsafe Harbor podcast is my personal passion project, and it is completely separate from my role with my current employer or the Workday organization. The ideas expressed on this podcast are my own and do not represent my employer or the Workday organization.